from KZ. My Silver Bell was the theme, and we have, one of the men who was at KZ at the time on air now with us. Phil Gibbs, good evening.
G'day, Bruce.
How are you going?
You two are hopeless.
Why?
I've just been listening to you and been laughing your heads off.
Yeah, we're inclined to, Phil, but then I'm glad you're picking us up loud and clear down in Tassie. Why did you retire to Tasmania, of all places?
I was born here.
That's a very good reason. You've come home again.
Yes, I always said from the moment... G'day, Phil.
Hi, Phil. How are you? Welcome to Australia's top-rating radio show.
I always said, though, just coming back to Bruce's question, I always said I would retire to Tasmania, and I was very, very fortunate that my wife, Gwen, after holidaying here once, twice, some years, but very rarely did we miss out. She loved the place and wanted to come here to live anyway.
Well, you were my studio manager at 3KZ, the then Brighter Broadcasting Service.
The Brighter Broadcasting Service, 3KZ.
That's right. No longer on the air, sadly, Phil.
And I'm no longer on the air either.
Do you miss the limelight, Phil?
No, Phil. I enjoyed it while I was there.
So where did it all start for you? Was it in Launceston that your radio career began?
1944.
Yes.
In LA, and I worked there for 5 years. And in 1949, I left there and went to 3KZ under Norman Banks and Eddie Barmer.
Well, Stan Hughes, who was on the air an hour ago, was there at the same time, said it was very hard to sort of battle with all the egos around the microphone, especially, in his words, the three Bs, Eddie Barmer, Lewis Bennett and Norman Banks. How did you fare?
Lewis had just left, but I was a kid, and if you look at football today, when you're a kid, you don't worry about the older ones, you get in there and have a go.
Yeah, that's good advice. Remember the days when we'd all group around the microphone in Studio 1 at 7 o'clock at night. One of us would say, "This is 3KZ Melbourne, the Brighter Broadcasting Service," hit the gongs. Another would say, "The time is 7 o'clock. The Maya Daily Message, here's the news." Bring back a few memories, Phil?
Well, that old Marshall tune is called Our Director.
Death or Glory.
Oh, Death of Glory.
Death or Glory March.
Well, I've been marching, you see, that's my problem. I've been marching with the Anzacs today. I was in the Launceston Junior Technical School Army Cadet Corps.
Right.
And I represented them today.
You took over the P&A parade for some time, didn't you, Phil?
Yes, I did. I took over the P&A parade. It became Swallows Parade.
Did you do it with John Ford?
No, John Ford never ever did that.
He might have been your announcer, Phil.
I don't know, Phil, but Eddie Barmer was the compere of P&A Parade, then became Swallows Parade. Eddie became general manager of the station, 3KZ, after Norman Banks left in 1952. Norman left because he wanted to go to the 52 Helsinki Games, and the then directors of the company said, if you go to the Olympic Games, you don't come back. And under Norman's advice to me, that started me off really in 3KZ. I'd been there, 3 years, but under Norman's advice, he said, do this, do that, ask for more money. Exactly what I did, and I became reasonably successful in the radio station.
Yes, well, you took on the studio managership and also on air, both as announcing and sports commentator.
That's right, and enjoyed every bit of it.
Did they have ratings in those days, Phil? And if so, how important were they?
No, they didn't. The biggest people in those days in the advertising industry were Clemengers. They were the only advertising people we really knew. A fellow called Mackay Irvine, he ran an advertising agency which had Swallows Parade. But Clemengers were the big names, and advertising agencies weren't all that big in those days. And I'm talking about, the early 1950s. But But ratings, no. Your success depended, I think in those days, on whether the sales guys could sell you or not.
Phil, here's a little of you in action. It's late at night in the Trades Hall, probably in the mid...
Bruce?
Yes?
Hang on a minute.
No, everything's all right.
Okay.
Here's Phil Gibbs.
This is 3Ks at Melbourne, the Brighter Broadcasting Service. The time is 10:30. This station is now preparing to close down until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, when Norman Swain will be on the air with your Brighter Breakfast program. Norman Swain at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning when we reopen with the Brighter Breakfast program. And now, on behalf of the management of 3Ks at Melbourne, this is Phil Gibbs saying good night, everyone.
Phil, would you hire that man today?
Yes, it sounds like either one of my sons, either Peter or Ian.
Is that right?
Yeah, it does, very much so.
Have they followed you into radio, Phil?
I know. I had the pleasure of both of them working with me on VFA football. But Peter, he's the commercial manager of Mercantile Mutual for Victoria. And Ian is quite successful as well in London. And he works for an American computer firm over there. Actually, he's on the Orient Express at this moment.
Wonderful. Phil, when we closed the station down, as you did from the 50s, we always play the good night song. Good night. Good night, everybody. Sleep tight. Take a look at the kiddies, just to see they're all right. Sweet, aren't they? Bless their little hearts. Now wind up the clock and put out the cat. And remember the milk jug. Lock up. And that's that. All the worry each long day demands. Tomorrow will dawn with a new happy day. So just close your eyes, hold your hands, and let 3KZ say good night. Norman Banks with the famous 3KZ goodnight song.
Yes, and you know who the vocal was there?
Is it Sam Costa?
No, Al Bowley.
You're kidding.
I'm not.
That'd be a valuable record then, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Now, Phil, tell us how you got involved with footy. And once Norman went to AW, were you calling with Jack Mueller?
No, I started calling with a former Hawthorn player, Jack Green.
Of course.
What happened, it was before Norman went over to 3AW. Norman was having his differences about going to the 52 Helsinki games. So he decided on the Friday that he wouldn't call the football. And a fellow called Mr. Arch Murray was then the general manager of 3KZ. And he phoned me on the Saturday morning and he said, we want you to call the football this afternoon. Now, I'd never called football in my life. And I'll never forget, it was Fitzroy and St Kilda being played on the old St Kilda Oval. And the only fellow I knew was a fellow called Ross, a ruckman. His father used to be caretaker of the Trades Hall, and that's where the station was situated. And he'd never played such a great game in his life because he was the only one I knew, and I kept calling his name. And I made a mess of it. But I did go down on the Monday, and the boss said, how do you think it went? I said, shocking. I said, give us a go next week. Well, Norman came back the following week, and Gwen had taken me through all the teams with their numbers and so on, and I called reasonably well, and I didn't stop calling for, something like 35 years.
Who were some of the people you called with, Phil?
Well, I started with Jack Green. I did call with Norman Banks. after that. Jack Dyer. Jack often says he started, I think, with 3XY. He did start with us. Lou Richards didn't call with us, but he was in Palaco Inquest with us. He started off in there. Then Harry Beitzel. Harry started with us. Jack Mueller. Jack was before Harry. Jack went overseas, and it's like taking a holiday, Bruce. When he came back...
Why did you direct that at me?
Eh?
Why did you direct that at me?
Well, I worked with you in radio and television for many, many years. The only time I ever worked with Phil was he used to come and sit in the studio while the kids' program was on, and we had a program at 6:30 every night called Hoyt's Hits or something.
Hoyt's Movies and Music.
Yes. And I said to Phil, he'd been sitting there for weeks, and I said, I'm going to put you into air tonight. And we used to always sign off and saying, see you outside. And then you'd turn off mic and say, where? And then you'd come back and say, outside of Hoyt's Suburban Theatre. And I let Phil say where one night.
Oh, we can't show all the pictures, so we only show the best. The others show the rest. You can put it to the test. So call your girlfriend right away. When she hears the news, she'll shout hooray. We'll be happier in the Hoyt Suburban Theatre. We'll be singing this song as we hurry along to Hoyt Suburban Theatre.
Phil, personally, it's bringing back a lot of lovely memories for me, and the one great thing that comes back in my mind is that KZ was a wonderful local station. It didn't have the glamour of the Davies and Dyers and big serial and big productions, but it seemed to have the heartbeat of Melbourne.
It was all community. And I give a lot of credit again to Norman Banks and fellows like Leslie Ross and Arthur Banks, who was Norman's brother, wasn't on the air, but a great salesman. And then you had the 3UZ side, Johnny McMahon. They grew up in the community. They grew up with the people. And today's lifestyle is completely different. I mean, you're talking populations here. You're talking a growth of an industry. And radio has grown over the years to become so diversified. Apart from 3AW, a lot of it is losing its identity. And I think you'll understand what I mean. There are so many different call signs on air today in Melbourne that it's very, very difficult to gain an identity. Now, without talking about pockets or whatever, I would like to say this, that I still listen to AW over here a great deal. Mainly of a night time. Actually, I'm very, very surprised, Philip, that at this stage you haven't mentioned your ratings.
I thought I'd let you do that for us, Phil.
Because listening to you and Bruce, since the last list of ratings came out, you haven't missed.
What about the transition to TV?
Very difficult. Very difficult. I remember coming home. It was difficult in the initial stages because, as Sir Reginald Land said to me, it'll be like getting out of a Tiger Moth and trying to fly a 727 or something. And he was a great man, for me anyway. He really did look after me, and we became quite good mates over the years. But when I first went out there, I remember coming home to Gwen. Barry McQueen was there at the time. Barry was rehearsing for new services. We rehearsed for a couple of months. And I remember coming home to Gwen and saying one night, they're all too bloody clever for me. I don't think I can do it. But I kept going, and it's like everything else. Once you do something often enough, think about it seriously enough, it doesn't become all that hard, does it?
Doesn't, Phil. And you know, you haven't had a bad record in employment in Melbourne, considering you only went to one radio station, KZ, and then to one television station, Channel O, Channel 10. Whereas most fellas, including myself, have been through more stations than the Southern Aurora.
Yeah, well, I always looked for security rather than anything else. And prior to going to Channel O, as it was then, the late Colin Bednall said to me, I did a Palaco inquest for one season on Channel 9. A lot of people wouldn't remember this.
No, I don't remember that.
Channel 7. And then Channel 10, or Channel O as it was. But I remember him pulling me up in the passage one evening, and he said, how'd you like to work for us? And I said, I was doing the Swallows Parade at the time. I said, no, I'll never throw away the substance for the shadow, because I wasn't too sure of television at that time.
Were you well paid for your efforts at 3KZ? You were one of their stars.
No, but when I resigned, and that resignation overlapped going into television for about 4 or 5 months, they had to pay up for what they hadn't paid me prior to that. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Phil, talking to you brings back memories of bowls on a Saturday night. You used to come in with Tom Hoey, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And you gave me Treadwell's party time from 10 past 10 to 1 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
That's right again, Bruce.
And you allowed me to utter my first word on commercial radio, Phil, which was, where? So you've been a big influence in both our careers, Phil Gibbs.
Well, I've enjoyed everything until about 6 months before I retired. I'd made up my mind. I was 58 years when I retired. I wanted to retire at 55, but I couldn't afford it. At 58, I thought I could. Always intended coming back to Tasmania, and over here, it is such a wonderful island. I could say wonderful, 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 but Bert might be listening. But I have absolutely enjoyed the last 4 years over here. People don't understand Tasmania. When you talk about Tasmania and Victoria, they say, but what about the weather? Our weather over here, particularly in the north and the east coast, is so much more even than any other part of Australia.
Phil, it's been an absolute delight speaking to you. News is in the wings, and we must away, and you know how important that is. Thanks for taking us down memory lane for a great meander through the old Trades Hall and those days.
Let's do it again sometime, Phil.
Okay, Phil, and to you, Bruce, good night. Thanks for talking with me, and good luck to your ratings next time.
Thank you, Philip Gibbs, who's taken us from KZ to Channel 10.